Revenge with Karen. The sound of paper tearing shouldn't echo in a boardroom. But when Logan Brax, freshly anointed CEO and human equivalent of a cologne ad, ripped my stock grant in half and let the pieces flutter to the floor like confetti, you could have heard a pin drop between the gasps and awkward coughs. I had just finished presenting our Q2 brand metrics. App Store ratings had spiked. User retention was at its highest since launch. Our 30 Days of Delight push notification campaign had gone viral on TikTok. And the new logo? It was already being knocked off by copycat startups in Asia. I was running through charts data, not vibes, when Logan leaned back in his ergonomic throne, laced his fingers together like a movie villain, and said, "Isabel, this is all very poetic. But where's the real value? I'm looking for assets, not adjectives." Then he pulled out my stock grant, one negotiated across 3 performance reviews and an all-hands presentation that made our head of product weep, and smiled like he was unveiling a gender reveal. "Brand work," he said, waving the paper like a damn flag, "is ornamental, not foundational." Then, rip, not going to lie, my ears rang, my throat went dry. But I didn't flinch. Not in front of the board, not in front of the interns pretending to type in the corner. I just looked down at the shredded remains of my future and said, "Understood," like I'd just been told my lunch was delayed. Then I stood up, packed my notes, and walked out, heels echoing like gunshots. And hey, if you've made it this far and you're not subscribed, you might be part of the 97% silently eavesdropping on these war stories without tossing us a like or follow. Go ahead and hit that button. It costs nothing. It fuels the chaos engine we call a content team. Anyway, I didn't slam the door, didn't call him a parasite or a fossil. I just left. I wanted them to think I was broken. It makes the silence more menacing. What none of them realized was this. Logan had just torn up paper, but I had written the code. Not the literal code, don't worry. I wasn't about to launch a DDoS from my couch. I'm talking about the DNA of the company's entire brand. The tone of every push notification, the UX copy in the onboarding flow, the product names, the hierarchy of color, the freaking breadcrumb icons, all of it registered under one binding little clause in a dusty legal document they hadn't cracked open since 2019. Clause 14. Derivative identity assets. I wrote it when the company was still operating out of a converted yoga studio with a whiteboard wall that kept flaking dry erase ink into our lunch. Back when we couldn't afford outside legal, so I read every contract myself, squinting at PDFs over grocery store ramen. I'd slipped it in because I knew this day would come, the day some suit would swagger in with a spreadsheet and try to gut the thing I built from scratch. I got home, took off my blazer, ordered a glass of something brown, sat down, opened the folder on my desktop labeled "just in case." Inside it, a clean copy of my contract, a list of visual assets, every registered brand element, and the time-stamped updates proving they were legally tied to me unless explicitly waived. Spoiler, they weren't. Meanwhile, I knew Logan would be riding high, chest puffed like a prize turkey. He probably thought he'd just performed a masterclass in leadership. The board, mostly finance guys with the emotional range of oatmeal, nodded along because they didn't get brand. They thought logos happened by accident, and UX copy came from elves. They wouldn't realize for weeks that their entire product suite was a house built on my intellectual property. That without me, their app didn't just lose a logo, it lost its soul. And once I walked, it wasn't just emotional baggage they'd be dragging around. It was legal liability, because I didn't just make things look pretty. I made them work. I made them resonate. And I made damn sure I owned them. I didn't box up anything. No awkward cardboard coffin filled with succulents and branded mugs. Just grabbed my leather notebook, the one with coffee stains and battle scars from 3 redesign cycles, and walked. Past the interns still pretending to type. Past the marketing team frozen mid-Slack gossip. Past Marcus from product, mouthed "I'm sorry" but didn't make a sound. No one moved, no one followed. They all just stared like someone had died, and maybe someone had. The Isabel who gave a damn was bleeding out somewhere between the espresso machine and the glass wall where my Q2 slides still flickered. Charts of loyalty metrics, churn drop-offs, share of voice graphs, now completely orphaned. HR intercepted me at the elevator. Kelly, mid-level, mid-witted, always wore banana print skirts like it was a personality, looked at me like she'd found a dog in the server room. "Hi. Just wanted to say your resignation is accepted. We'll start offboarding this afternoon. Please return any company devices by EOD. I blinked once. I didn't resign. Oh, haha, right? Well, I think Logan said you did, or that you were leaving voluntarily. Anyway, we've processed it. I stepped into the elevator without replying. Doors closed on her nervous smile and clacking keyboard. I swear I could still hear her typing, even after I hit the parking level. Out in the garage, I sat in my car for 10 full minutes. Not crying, not breathing hard, just letting the silence pour over me like bleach. I thought about how I'd stayed late during launch week, rewriting 600 error messages by hand because the automated ones sounded like a DMV printer having a panic attack. I thought about the time Logan emailed me Make It Pop More in response to a 2-month /B tested rebrand rollout. And mostly, I thought about the little clause I buried in that contract 2 years ago, the clause no one bothered to read. When I got home, I kicked off my shoes, fed the cat, and opened the fireproof lockbox in the closet, pulled out the original contract. Clause 14, Derivative Identity Assets. Read it again, slowly, like poetry. Stated in so many dry legal syllables that all branded assets I created, visuals, nomenclature, UX copy, color systems, icon sets, were licensed under my personal LLC unless specifically waived in writing. They never waived it. They just assumed that because I wore cardigans and didn't yell, I was soft. But I'd watched too many women before me get squeezed out of their own legacies. I wasn't going to be another name they deleted off the About page before Monday. I wasn't going to be a LinkedIn casualty in their leadership shakeup. No, I was going to let them think they'd won. Let them build momentum on a lie. Let them scramble for deliverables and demos while the foundation eroded from under them. Let Logan Brax polish his ego in the mirror while the clock ticked on something he didn't even know he'd triggered. I poured a second glass, opened my laptop, logged into the IP registry. I wasn't going to do anything yet. That was the beauty of it. All I had to do was wait. Let them edit a few things, try a half-assed rebrand, submit a rushed update to the App Store. Because the second those assets changed, they'd be operating outside the bounds of the original license. And then they'd be in my territory. The silence wasn't just peace. It was a weapon. And I was going to sharpen it slowly, carefully, till they realized too late that I never left the battlefield. I just changed where the war was being fought. 2 days after I walked, the branding Frankenstein began. I knew it because Clara, sweet, spineless Clara from UX, texted me a blurry photo of a whiteboard scrawled with the words "Rebrand Sprint All Hands" in red marker, like it was a hostage situation. Underneath were bullet points that made my molars itch. New logo, name moments flow color scheme. Less feminine, Logan's words, find outside help. They were already gutting it. Logan probably thought he could slap a new coat of paint on the product and nobody would notice. Change the typeface, recolor some buttons, call it a day. He didn't understand that brand isn't decoration, it's infrastructure. It's plumbing. You don't just yank the sink out and expect the water to stay in the pipes. By Wednesday, contracted some budget agency out of Austin, Minty, or Blanc, or some other all-caps aesthetic atrocity to help modernize the brand. I peeked at their Behance portfolio, a graveyard of SAW logos that looked like prescription pill labels. Half the designs used gradients that gave me retinal whiplash. This was who they trusted to rewire the emotional heartbeat of a user experience I'd bled into for 5 years. I almost felt bad. Almost. Meanwhile, I updated my IP registry quietly, methodically. A few key timestamps, a new certificate for the interface nomenclature, and a backdated statement of authorship notarized because I don't play when it comes to receipts. It was all about the paper trail, not the drama. That would come later. I logged into the developer dashboard out of curiosity. The main app was still tied to my name. Specifically, branding license originator, Green LLC. It was right there, plain Arial 12 PT. They hadn't even bothered to reassign it. Or maybe they didn't know how. Because Brax didn't read dashboards. He read quarterly reports. He liked numbers with dollar signs and keywords like scalability and burn rate. The only brand he respected was the kind you can wear on a golf course. Inside their office, chaos brewed. I knew the in-house designers were floundering because suddenly their LinkedIn activity exploded. Likes on old posts, updated portfolios, thirsty comments under design influencers. That's the professional equivalent of waving a white flag. And I knew Clara had one toe out the door because she started deeming me again. Not gossip this time, but cryptic little questions like, do you remember if the moment's icons were SVG or PNG? And you wouldn't happen to have the old tone guide, would you? No, Clara, I wouldn't. Not anymore. Rax's first mistake was assuming the visual stuff was optional, that it could be patched with Helvetica and Hustle. He thought the soul of a product lived in the back end, in the tech stack, in how fast a button clicked. He didn't get that it lives in how it clicks, what the button feels like, what it says, how the color makes you trust it or ignore it. The second mistake, trying to rebuild it without me, because every design decision they undid was a move out of license. Every rewritten headline, every recolored flow, every renamed feature, they were walking barefoot into a minefield I had planted with manicured precision. But I didn't need to call a lawyer yet. That would come later. For now, I watched them stitch together their monster, dead pixels, clashing colors, soulless type, and I smiled, because I knew what was coming. You can't fake authenticity. You can't outsource vision. You sure as hell can't survive the storm when your brand foundation is made of sand and arrogance. Let them color. Let them rename. Let them tape over the cracks with pastel gradients and Fiverr logos. Every change they made only pulled them deeper into my web. And the best part, they still thought they were in control. It started as a trickle. A tweet here, a Reddit thread there. Anyone else think the app's gotten weird lately? Where'd the Moments feature go? It's called Journeys now. They changed the logo, and now it looks like a blood pressure app. Why do the buttons feel like they were designed by a sad intern in Canva? By Friday, it was a digital mutiny. Our most loyal users, early adopters, superfans, the ones who evangelized us when we were still in beta, were turning on the product like wolves sniffing rot. They didn't know about Clause 14, or licensing rights, or derivative asset IP. They knew something had shifted, that the soul was gone. I was on my second glass of Bordeaux, curled up on my couch, scrolling Reddit with the kind of smile I usually reserve for dogs wearing sweaters. The main thread had over 1,000 comments. Someone had uploaded a side-by-side of the old login screen versus the new one. The caption read, "One of these was made by someone who gave a shit." I laughed, out loud, like ugly laughed. Brax, to no one's surprise, not find it funny. Internally, things started to break. A product update failed Apple's brand continuity check. Apparently, they flagged inconsistencies in metadata. Assets registered under one brand identity were now trying to masquerade as another. The App Store team kicked the update back with a politely passive-aggressive message about unresolved conflicts in asset history. At first, Logan assumed it was a technical bug. He had engineers comb through code they didn't write and didn't understand. But the errors weren't in the code. They were wrapped around it. Invisible strings, ownership tags, metadata certificates. 1,000 silent watermarks that all pointed back to me. Design QA flagged anomalies in the button asset libraries. The icons for the new Journeys flow, the rebranded version of my Moments, were triggering hash mismatches. Our internal asset verification tool was throwing red flags like confetti. The kicker, a compliance bot, when they set up to auto-monitor third-party content for licensing violations, sent an alert directly to the legal team. Subject line, warning potential IP conflict. Asset cluster M17/license holder. Green LLC, it was like their own system snitched. I imagined the lawyers blinking at their inboxes in confusion. Wait, who is I? Green again, then digging, then seeing my name, and then realizing what they'd done. Logan started holding emergency touchpoints, which, translated from Braxis, meant he was screaming at interns while drinking Celsius and trying to cancel meetings that he himself had scheduled. Word was he banned the word brand in the office for a full 24 hours, said it was a distraction from the product roadmap. Meanwhile, the roadmap was on fire, and the wheels had fallen off the car. Sure, blame adjectives. The agency they hired, Blanc or whatever, ghosted. Apparently, the moment they sniffed legal trouble, they hit the eject button and sent an invoice with a 48-hour payment demand. Classic, and the best part, I didn't lift a finger. I didn't send a letter. I didn't make a call. I didn't even leak anything. The system was simply doing what it was designed to do, protect my work. Because unlike Brax and his legion of clumsy rebranders, planned ahead, I built it like a cathedral, not a startup. Every pixel was tagged, every flow named, every file baked with legal DNA that pointed back to me. Now, as the backlash bubbled online and the App Store pushed back another update, I simply sipped my wine, refreshed Twitter, and read the latest gem. Whoever designed the original UX, I hope you're thriving. You were the reason I used this app. Now it feels like a spreadsheet in drag. Cheers, stranger. I was thriving. The subject line read, "Hope you're well, quick question about brand legacy." I didn't even open the body. Just stared at the words, let the irony marinate, then filed it in a folder called Evidence Phase 2. They were panicking now. You could taste it in the phrasing. Gone was the posturing, the condescension, the patronizing tone of you were always such a valuable part of the journey. This was the kind of corporate olive branch they send right before the dam breaks, and the lawsuits start swimming through the vents. What had finally triggered it? Clause 14. Some poor junior associate, probably fresh out of Georgetown law and buried in oat milk lattes and NDAs, had stumbled across it during a routine contract audit. Translation: they were searching for anything that could legally mop up the dumpster fire Brax had lit with his ego and a matchbook labeled Agile branding. Turns out, when you license all identity assets to yourself through your LLC and don't waive ownership, you actually own the damn thing. That includes derivative works, meaning the second they modified moments into journeys and pushed that to production. Ding ding, violation. App Source of Truth library was practically radioactive now. Buttons, headers, voice tone, push copy, even the damn loading animation with the rotating circles. They were all assets tied to me via a web of licenses and registrations that looked like a conspiracy theorist's corkboard. Logan did what all men like Logan do when faced with consequences. He barked. Rewrite everything. Rebuild from scratch. Get AI to do it. Just make it different. Brought in a new contractor team to rebrand the rebrand. Some ex-agency creative director with a tight jaw and a nervous eye twitch was flown in from New York to course correct. But the timeline was impossible, and the product was already broken in the wild. Users were deleting the app in droves, writing RIP eulogies on App Store reviews, comparing the new design to DMV kiosks and knockoff dating apps. Legal, meanwhile, was trying to triage. Emailed me again. "Hi Isabel, hope all's well. Wondering if you'd be open to a brief consult regarding legacy materials and brand narrative alignment. We think your perspective could be incredibly valuable as we move into a new chapter." They really used new chapter. Like this was a college newsletter and not a full-blown IP hemorrhage. I ignored it. Grim satisfaction doesn't come from yelling. It comes from knowing the house is already halfway underwater and someone just noticed the sound of rushing water isn't the AC. Then came the moment they thought would save them, a new product update. The engineers worked around the clock. Legal scrubbed every file they could. Design uploaded a stripped-down, sterile build. They clicked submit. Apple flagged it within 3 hours. Rejected. Reason: copyright conflict with existing asset history. Violation: derivative identity usage without confirmed ownership waiver. Registered owner: I, Green LLC. I pictured Logan getting the rejection email mid-sprint meeting, watching the blood drain from his face while the room fell silent. That sickly corporate silence where no one wants to be the first to say what now, because they know there is no next move. They didn't have a brand anymore, not one they could legally publish anyway. And now, finally, someone up the food chain was asking the right question. Who signed off on that clause? Answer: you did. Nobody reads the fine print until it's carved into the side of the boat and the hull's filling fast. At exactly 12:03 a.m., the app vanished from the US store. By 12:06, it was gone in Canada, Germany, Australia, Japan. By 12:11, it was over. All 4 of their flagship apps. Pulled. Apple's takedown notice was brisk and brutal. Violation of registered IP licensing terms. Ownership conflict unresolved. Reinstatement pending rights resolution. Google followed suit with a copy-paste of Apple's wording, which honestly felt petty, like even they were tired of Brax's shit. The websites went dark within the hour. The front-end assets? Blocked by auto-CDN filters due to flagged ownership metadata. CDN provider had its own compliance filter tied to the same registry I updated 3 weeks ago. Yes, the one with my LLC listed as source authority for all brand-facing identity packages. And just like that, the lights went out. I watched it unfold from my living room, barefoot, in sweatpants, glass of wine in one hand, Fiona Apple humming under the table in my ears. There was a certain poetry to it, woman whispering fury while a man's empire quietly choked on its own arrogance. My phone started buzzing at 12:15. Board members. Contractors. A PM I hadn't spoken to in a year. Some texts were frantic. Some were apologetic. One just said, "Holy shit." And then the headlines started. Crunch. Startup darling faces IP meltdown after founder departure. The Verge. Rebrand to nowhere. How a CEO's ego crashed a unicorn fast company. The woman who owned the brand. Literally, I hadn't spoken a word to any journalist. But metadata doesn't lie. My name was right there in the copyright notices. Registered, time-stamped, legally clean. I wasn't making a scene, I was enforcing a contract. And the world ate it up. By 12:45, investors were pulling out. 3 VC funds posted quiet portfolio adjustments on LinkedIn. 2 enterprise clients paused active rollout contracts, citing compliance risks. One of them was their biggest SAW partner, gone in a single email. Back inside the office, I imagined Logan flailing. "She can't do this." He probably shrieked, tie half askew, shirt pit-stained with Celsius and failure. "This is illegal." But it wasn't. I did. I wasn't even in the room. I'd left silence behind like a landmine, and now it was detonating in symmetrical, well-documented bursts. This wasn't revenge porn. It wasn't sabotage. It was the slow, elegant collapse of a structure that should have never been built without its architect. And in the middle of it all, I was calm. The kind of calm you get after years of being talked over. After watching PowerPoints scrub your name from credits. After hearing words like decorative and soft skills tossed around in feedback forms. No shouting, no press tour. Just headphones, red wine, and Fiona singing, "Kick me under the table all you want / I won't shut up, I won't shut up." I didn't need to say a word. The code was already written. The system was just following instructions. They taught me that branding was emotional labor. Intangible, replaceable. Turns out it was infrastructure. I was the last one holding the blueprints. At 2:04 a.m., my phone lit up like a pinball machine having a nervous breakdown. 28 missed calls. 12 from numbers I didn't recognize. 4 from someone labeled Bored Cheryl who once told me my push notifications were a bit too emotional. 2 from Logan. Both went straight to voicemail. 1 from Clara. Just said, "They're unraveling." And then there was the one voicemail I did listen to. Hal Trevors, senior board member and resident handshake philosopher. His voice was lower than usual, stripped of its wine-slick confidence. "Isabel, Miss Green, I'm going to be honest with you. This is not good. We were unaware of certain licensing complexities, and look, just name your terms, please. Let's fix this." There it was. Not "we miss you," not "you were right." Just name your terms. That's what happens when the value of your silence eclipses the cost of their pride. So I got up, tied my hair back, cracked my knuckles, and opened the draft I'd been quietly refining for weeks. The PDF was titled, "Licensing Buyback Agreement Green IP Holdings, LLC." It was precise. Elegant. Legal poetry. Clause 1. The full retransfer of all identity asset rights currently held by Green IP Holdings. Clause 2. Licensing fee market rate X3, rounded up, not down. Clause 3. Retroactive compensation equal to shredded stock grant valuation at current company worth. Clause 4. CEO Logan Brax's immediate resignation, submitted no later than 5 p.m. Friday, with full public statement citing creative misalignment. Clause 5. No NDA, no non-compete, no edits. And my favorite, Clause 6. Offer expires in 48 hours. After which, all licensed assets shall be considered permanently non-transferable. I didn't use fancy fonts, just Calibri, black and white. Clean. I attached it to an email with no body text, just a subject line, per your voicemail. Then I sent it. No follow-up, no typing bubble, just the satisfying whoosh of a loaded invoice delivered straight to the desk of every man who once used my work like wallpaper and called it intangible. Because this wasn't rage anymore. This wasn't revenge. This was billing. They had 2 days, 48 hours to decide if they wanted their company back, or if they wanted to keep running laps around legal, praying for a loophole that didn't exist. And while they scrambled to review, to redact, to negotiate, I poured myself another drink, opened Spotify, and put on some Philip Glass. I didn't need to watch. I already knew the outcome. Brax wouldn't survive the next board call. Investors wouldn't tolerate a second of lost revenue. And they sure as hell weren't going to rebuild the brand from scratch, not when they couldn't even rebuild a login screen. They thought I was gone, but I never left. I was just waiting for the invoice to mature. They didn't even wait until business hours. At 6:27 a.m., just 4 hours after my email hit their inbox, the board convened a virtual emergency session, kind where everyone shows up half-dressed and over-caffeinated, muting themselves only to curse off-camera. The meeting minutes would later describe it as a strategic recalibration. Internally, they called it what it was, an execution. Logan Brax was removed by unanimous vote. The official release, scrubbed and sanitized by the comms team, framed it as a parting of ways due to creative differences and a misalignment in long-term brand vision, even trotted out a buzzword salad about evolving identity synergy. But behind the scenes, it was pure triage, a necessary amputation to stop the bleeding before the shareholders turned feral. I didn't smile. I didn't even blink. Instead, I sat in my lawyer's office, clean oak table, silent AC hum, the scent of printer toner and blood in the water, flipping through the revised licensing agreement, page by page. Every clause I demanded was present. The ink on Brax's resignation letter was barely dry. The buyback fee, paid in full. The stock restitution, retroactively vested. There was even a note in the margin confirming the App Store reinstatement trigger would be processed within the hour. I initialed each page without a word. When I signed the final one, my attorney slid it back into the envelope like we were sealing up a body. "Anything else you want added?" he asked. I shook my head. "No, this is enough. Power doesn't need noise, not when it moves like gravity." At 9 a.m. sharp, the apps returned to the stores. Quietly, no fanfare, just back, like nothing had ever happened. But the changes were there if you looked closely. My name tucked into the metadata. The visual hierarchy realigned to my original system. The product tone reset to its true voice. And then came the PR push. The company posted a LinkedIn announcement within the hour. "We're thrilled to welcome back Isabel Green in a strategic capacity as we continue evolving our mission." Her original vision helped define our product, and her return marks an exciting new chapter in brand leadership. The press ate it up. Visionary designer returns to rescue startup brand architect reinstated after CEO shake-up company learns expensive lesson in intellectual property. My inbox filled with polite congratulations, back-channel job offers, speaking invites I'd never accept. The founders who once ghosted my emails now CC'd me on everything. They even sent flowers, twice. But the moment I'll remember was the call. Unknown number, I answered without thinking. And there he was, Logan Brax. His voice was raw, guttural, like something had been carved out of him. He started, "I didn't know. I didn't realize what you'd done. I didn't read I cut him off. You should have read what you signed." Silence. Then I hung up, no threats, no anger, just exit. He'd spent months trying to erase me with red ink. But in the end, it was white paper, legal, binding, clinical, that buried him. And now, I wasn't back at the company. Not really, I was above it. Licenser, architect, quiet storm. They didn't own me, they licensed access to my mind. And next time, they'd pay up front. Friday, 5 p.m. The kind of hour when offices pretend to be winding down, but everyone's just refreshing Slack waiting for someone else to make the first move. I was home. Curtains drawn, calm. The storm had passed, and I didn't even need to raise my voice. I opened my laptop, logged into the new admin portal. The login screen was different now, not the sanitized SAW-S interface they'd slapped together mid-panic, but the one I designed 3 years ago. The soft gradient. The 3-second delay that gently faded the screen instead of jarring the user into the dashboard. They'd reverted to everything I built, because they had no choice, because the new agreement said they could use it, but I owned it. "Welcome to Green IP Holdings, LLC." Interface loaded, and with it, full access to the company's visual asset management system. Logos, tone files, onboarding flows, color architecture, typography guidelines, every brushstroke and breadcrumb restored not as theirs, but under license. My license. I scrolled to the internal brand system, the backend library that design teams relied on to stay on brand. It used to be called Beacon. Now, renamed it. Worthless trademark, the trademark symbol was important. I hovered over the metadata tag editor and added one last clause to the shared style guide. All brand contributions subject to legal review and royalty. Unauthorized use constitutes a breach of contract. Nothing dramatic, no fireworks, just a little line of truth in 12 PT font, locked in place. Permanent. There would be no more erasing women's work with a shrug and a pivot table. No more soft skills buried in quarterly reports while dudes in vests took credit for retention spikes. Not anymore. This was my signature, not the kind you scrawl on a goodbye card, but the kind that sits in a footer, quietly dictating the terms of engagement. I leaned back in my chair, looked out at the soft pink of the evening skyline. My phone buzzed, an investor pitch. New startup, big budget. We'd love your magic touch. Even used the phrase brand whisperer. Gag, I smiled, then hit decline. I wasn't interested in whispering anymore. I closed the laptop. Poured a neat 2 fingers of whiskey. No ice, no emails. Just the warm hum of knowing that everything they tried to erase was now their foundation, and they'd pay for every pixel. This wasn't revenge. This was recognition with interest. Curtain drop. Read your contracts, boys. Big thanks, you legends of the old office days. Subscribe to keep the switch-flicking chaos alive. Your ex-boss is shaking in their loafers.